Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is how you actually fund a buy-sell agreement. And there are several different ways. Sometimes it's through business agreements, sometimes you can fund them through insurance. So let's talk very quickly about the 4 Ds of a buy-sell agreement and how you might go about funding that buy-sell agreement. So first and foremost, death. Death is the simplest one to cover because simply it's very clear that it's happened and there's a definite way to fund them, and you in fact fund this with insurance. Very simple. What type of insurance do you fund it with? You always fund it with the cheapest type of insurance you can find, which is 10-year term life insurance. Never ever buy a whole life policy or some sort of permanent policy, or never buy a term longer than 10 years. Business is too dynamic, things change too fast, and if you pay for a guarantee that's anything longer than 10 years, you're paying way too much for a policy that is guaranteed to change. So please stay within that 10-year time frame and make sure that you're buying 10-year term insurance, nothing more, nothing less. Keep the policy costs very simple. Number 2, disability. There are, in fact, insurance policies that you can buy to cover disability, but this is going to be a combo, a combination of insurance as well as business provisions. How long will we continue to pay one partner's salary if he or she becomes disabled in a car wreck, something else, and is mentally incapable of coming to work? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? And then do we fund a disability policy for that individual after that point that takes care of their income and they transfer the shares back to the company? These are a combination of a business agreement structured with some layering of insurance where it's important or where it's necessary. In a divorce situation, unfortunately, we don't have any divorce insurance. So this is strictly a business situation. What are we going to do in terms of a divorce? There are really a couple different approaches that are common and most appropriate. First one is, in a divorce situation, you can actually, before the divorce happens, set up an agreement with the spouse called a spousal consent form that says, hey, this is an asset that is going to be regarded in our estate. However, it's an asset that as a divorcing spouse, I don't get to take. That the partner keeps it and they compensate me for it outside of the company so that the company isn't damaged. The individual having the divorce is the one that has to deal with the economic consequences of how to transfer assets or value to the divorcing spouse while retaining that partnership interest. That is one option. Option number 2 is you can say on divorce, the portion of the divorcing spouse's half of, in this case, half of the partnership interest or business interest or shares are going to be bought back by the other shareholders. The other business, in the case of a cross purchase, the other shareholder, in the case of an entity buy-sell, maybe by the business as a whole. So it can be dealt with either way, and then you're going to want to think about one other thing that happens with both of these last two, which is how you're going to buy them out. The last thing is dissolution. This is always a business solution. Unfortunately, there is no insurance at all for this. Just like divorce, we have to think about all of the various business provisions that might end in a dissolution of the company or sale of the business. What's going to happen if we want to separate and walk away? Who gets to walk away? The other person, can they buy their shares? Are they forced to buy their shares? These are all things you'll want to talk about and make sure we get into an agreement. Finally, though, if we do decide on how we're going to actually do this, how do we fund it? The funding is incredibly important in a buy-sell agreement because without it, well, the buy-sell breaks down because no one can actually buy out the other party. You can't actually enact the buy-sell. So what you have to think about is if I'm going to buy out a shareholder who's leaving, how can I do that? For most businesses, the right answer is somewhere along the lines of a 10-year buyout at market interest. Whatever the market interest rate is at that point in time, this is how you'll pay it out at over a 10-year period of time or longer. Why? Because most businesses are making somewhere between a 10 and a 20% net profit margin. If that's the case, they can withstand the cash flow hit to buy out the partner over a 10-year period of time. Anything shorter than that, and likely they're not going to be able to have enough cash to buy out a 50% or more partner. Because remember, if your business is making $100,000 a year, you can only afford a payment of $50,000 because the IRS is going to take 50% of that. That means you've got $50,000 left to make payments, which means if your business is worth $1 million, you're only going to be able to make those $50,000 payments to your 50% partner over a 10-year period of time. That gets you to $500,000 and gets them bought out without a negative cash impact, without a massive negative cash impact to the business. So if you fund these, you're going to fund them on a buyout that's a minimum of a 10-year period of time with a market interest rate to make sure that the business itself is not negatively impacted. These are rarely situations that you can fund with bank financing or other types of alternative financing. Most of the time with small businesses, these are required to be self-funded, which means you have to make sure that you're thinking about the taxes and the structure before you put a time period on this. If you tell someone, for example, you're going to buy them out over 2 or 3 years, you better have a ton of cash set aside somewhere to be able to buy them out. These are the funding mechanisms for each of the 4 Ds, and ultimately, if you have to come up with a business solution, how do you fund a buyout of a partner over time?